I have to pop smoke here. Go join her.
I'm jealous of all these people outside, like Jean and Eric on their patios, enjoying the weather.
Mhm. All right, we are live streaming. I know Councilmember Ewing is not going to be with us tonight, but I don't see Frederick or Tadget yet. Hi, Angie.
Good evening.
Has anybody heard from Marcus or Sean? No? Okay.
I'm checking with them right now.
Okay.
Sean's on his way.
There he is.
I recommend we go ahead and get started.
Okay, let's do it, Kim. You got it.
All right, so tonight's council workshop meeting, 100% virtual via Zoom, Thursday, September 7th. In accordance with the governor's proclamation on COVID. And we are going to have three things tonight to talk about. And one of them is the amendment to interlocal agreement with City of Marysville regarding development and improvements to the power line trail. Russ, you want to lead that off? And I just heard from Marcus and he will not be able to be here.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Daughtry. Jill Meese will be doing this presentation tonight, and I will be available to answer some questions. I will let the council know that I did have a conversation with Councilmember Peter Shagan a while ago, and we've talked about a couple of errors in this document. And so it's probably not ready for a full recommendation from you tonight, but we definitely want to talk about where this document came from, which was originally passed around 2019, and what the intent is. But I will hand it off to Jill to give you a description of the proposed changes to this ILA, and then available for any questions about the original document.
Good evening. Tonight I have brought the proposed draft amendment to the ILA that the City of Marysville is proposing. The highlights of the changes are going to be the time frame in which the agreement is to be executed, and then one of the, not the agreement, excuse me, but the project to be executed, and then the location of the trail head that the City of Marysville is providing for this trail. So as Russ mentioned, in July of 2019, the City of Lake Stevens partnered with the City of Marysville in efforts of trail design, development, and location of a multi-use non-motorized trail and amenities to connect both of our communities. They contacted us earlier this summer and said that the COVID-19 crisis resulted in delays for planning and development of the Powerline Trail for the city of Marysville. And they requested additional time to facilitate the project planning and construction. So like, as I mentioned, they're asking for an additional time frame, an increase in the preliminary design timeline from 3 years to 6 years, as well as the trail completion date of 10 years instead of 7 years. As I mentioned earlier as well, they're looking to locate their trailhead amenities a little on a piece of property that they own in the general vicinity of the trail. Originally, when the agreement was executed, it was within a half mile of the convergence of the two trails, the city of Marysville's Bayside Trail, and then what we're calling our Powerline Trail. So I have their parcel shown on our on a map, so you can see where they're proposing. I'm going to. It looks like the screen sharing has been disabled. Kelly.
Yep, I will give you permission right now.
Thank
Okay,
you.
you should be good.
So I don't know if this has come up yet or not on your screen for you to view. I will zoom in on it, but right now, this in red, this line here from north to south, this is our two trails, and they converge at our city limit boundaries right here, just west of the 83rd Avenue Northeast, and then just east of 79th. So the property that the city of Marysville owns is approximately 0.75 miles from where the city limit boundary is. And I'll zero in on that. And they own this property right here, and it's well suited for a trailhead with those amenities that they had partnered with in the original agreement. But here's a good visual of it, shows you approximately how far away from the original. The original site, Russ, if you have additional information on that, I'm not exactly sure where the original site was discussed, but this is approximately 0.75 miles away from the original site.
Yeah, the original site was never entirely locked in, but they were looking to try and find something closer to the Highway 9 corridor, a little further east, and they really didn't have any large areas of existing public property.
Thank you. So with that, that's generally the changes that they are proposing for the ILA agreement. And with that, I will answer what questions I have, and Russ will help with any other questions.
I have a
Mary?
question. Yeah,
Sure.
Go ahead, Mary.
thank you. I live on Soper Hill Road, just so you know. This is my neighborhood, and I know exactly where this trail is. It's west of 83rd. So my question, I felt, was kind of odd, but I'm new. I don't know if this is odd or not, but is it common for us to have Marysville work on the trail, the Powerline Trail, and we pay for it? They design it, they do the work, and we pay for it. Is that common? I don't know.
The construction of the trail on the city of Lake Stevens property, or on
the city of Lake Stevens side.
It's my understanding, and Russ can add additional information, but that the city of Lake Stevens would be constructing the trail on the city's side of the jurisdiction, and the city of Marysville would be constructing the trail on the city of Marysville side.
Okay, that makes more sense. That's not the way I read it, but okay, thank you. That makes more sense.
Yeah, it was a little confusing. I think we had something in there at one time, or still, that said that if Marysville was to do it on our side, we would pay them for it.
Thank you.
So a couple of the issues that I referenced earlier in section 1A, the last sentence references consistent with paragraph 4. I believe the notation to paragraph 4 was the original ILA, not the C below. And the original ILA in paragraph 4 talked about phasing of the project based on funding. And so that would be a more appropriate reference. We'll work with Marysville on that. And just a little bit of background, one of the other questions that I chatted with Councilmember Peter Shagan about what was the purpose of this agreement in the first place. So at a certain point in time, the city was having conversations with Marysville, not only about the Parks and Recreation system shared between that part of Lake Stevens and the Whiskey Ridge area, and how a lot of those areas were using Lake Stevens parks. We were also having a parallel conversation about the impacts of traffic from Marysville flowing into Lake Stevens. So we executed a separate agreement to deal with the transportation side. And this one was to deal specifically with joint recreation uses. And it had been important to the council when they approved this to make sure that Marysville was providing a park for the Whiskey Ridge development. And as we had talked to Marysville about this, one of the reasons they did want to push it out was because of the impacts of COVID over the last couple of years and not really getting any traction. And I can share with you, and Jill can go into more detail, we have participated in a review of consultants with Marysville to get to the design phase of this project. And Jill can speak to any schedule, but there's no dedicated funding for this project to go to construction at this point. So if you'd like to add anything, go ahead.
That's correct, Russ. And the city of Marysville has selected their consultants, and they did invite Lake Stevens city staff to sit in on those interviews. And we did sit in on those interviews for their consultant selection, and selected a group that will be providing the plan for their trailhead and their park, as well as the location and siting of their trail. Very similar to the same thing the city of Lake Stevens went through when we did our master trail program.
Councilmember Jorstad.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the dates. When it talks about extending the dates from 2 to 4 years for the preliminary design and 6 years for the final design, is that the date of the original agreement in 2019 or the date of this amendment?
That's my understanding, that the intent is to go back to the original date and just add in the couple of years of delay.
Okay, so when it says, for example, to take the preliminary design will be completed within 4 years, does that then mean, since the original agreement was done in 2019, that would be completed in 2023?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Peter Shagan.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. And yes, we did have a brief conversation a little bit before the council meeting. One thing I want to stress here, and for a couple of the newer council members, this was kind of an agreement to address the impacts on Soper Hill Road. Marysville came to us and wanted to do some things, which they've done between 83rd and
7th.
the entrance to Crosswater, I guess it is. Yeah. And in exchange for that, we wanted to have some sort of agreement with them that would kind of set in stone some improvements for park areas. And at the meeting that we had a joint council meeting with the city of Marysville, everybody was hot to go about doing this trail and such. And Mayor Spencer was very passionate about this. And it was with the idea that, you can go forth with your road improvements, Marysville, but give us some assurance that we're going to have some sort of recreation facility. And so when I look at this agreement, number one, I don't know about you folks, but my life kind of went on with COVID, and COVID's been with us for 18 months. Things have been kind of normalized for the last 6 to 9 months. So this kind of excuse that they haven't been able to get anything going because of COVID doesn't hold a lot of water with me. And then the other thing is, we're talking maybe of getting something maybe in the next 10 years. And this was with the idea that, we were working with them on Soper Hill Road. And so it just seems like there's a huge disconnect here. And the other council members and Mayor Gailey, who was in that meeting, can chime in here. But it was kind of a situation of let's do this sooner, not later or never. And this document seems like it's later, and maybe never. Additionally, I guess I'd like to say, the trailhead, we were talking about a trailhead in my mind, I think at somewhere where the trail is, not some distant area to the east. And so I think the body or the premise of what was discussed is missing in this document, and it's this isn't what we agreed to. So I would say that, I guess number one, what do we need it for? We don't need it if they're willing to set this out so far. And number two, if we do agree to this, we need to tighten up these timeframes and make it a priority to get some things done. There is just a sore lack of recreation facilities in that area, which Lake Stevens and Marysville share. And I just think it's a shame that we're talking about extending something out to maybe as long as 12 years from now, or never. It needs to be a priority, and it needs to get done. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the council tonight?
I've got one. Let's take the look at the Lake Stevens side of this equation. So based on our last meeting that we had, our retreat a couple of weeks ago, we said we have a whole bunch of priorities we want to do, and we have not enough money to do all those priorities. Are we in the same boat as Marysville is saying, because we wouldn't be able to fund this in the first place to get to our side of it?
And we've taken a slightly different approach in that we had done our trail master plan already. Our first improvements we're investing in are in the south end. And we have gone through the process, though, with our trail master plan to identify those connections. But again, we've prioritized the south end for our starting point, and then the small section through Frontier Heights. So yeah, it's unknown when we would get back to our northern end as well to make that connection, or at least fund the construction.
Yeah, I'll jump in here as well. I would agree with Gary. Good recollection on this discussion and how it came out over the Soper Hill issues. One of the things I'm looking at, Russ, when I'm looking at their piece of property on Skokie is, as I understand it, the trail that they have that they're building is under the power lines further to the west of that trailhead, possible trailhead location. So I'm not seeing how that trailhead location links up with where their current trail is. And maybe I'm missing it. So I'm not tracking with that trailhead spot.
Right, and the way they've defined it, it's not exclusively a trailhead. It's a neighborhood park in proximity to the trail.
Yeah, let's step back on this one. When we agreed on this a couple of years ago with Marysville, it was a trailhead, restroom facilities along the same trail that we were building with them, and not a hey, thanks Marysville for building another park somewhere else, kind of close by, but not really.
Okay.
Yeah, let's step back on this one.
One other
Councilmember
thing I'd like to
Frederick?
point out is on section 1C, where I know Mary or somebody said preliminary design, I think that was Angie, sorry. Preliminary design will be completed within 4 years effective date of this agreement. Doesn't the effective date of this agreement get changed when we sign the new agreement?
I think we
So-
would have to be specific in section 3. They obviously go back to the original date, but I think the intent was to have it just not reset the clock for another 12 years, but to push it out the additional.
Well, I
from the
understand
start.
that, but when you have it says
Yeah.
the effective date, if you could say the original effective date,
Yeah. Yep.
I would feel, I mean, if it's going to get pushed out, I don't want anybody to misinterpret this 4 years from now with maybe a brand new mayor, brand new council in Marysville, and the same could happen here in Lake Stevens and nobody knows what the hell's going on.
Fair point. Councilmember Frederick?
Yeah, I was going to thank Gary as well. While I wasn't on the city council at that point, I do. I remember the conversation around this trail, and yeah, this doesn't make sense. I think everybody knows where I stand on the status of COVID. And I have to agree with Councilmember Peter Shagan from the perspective of ongoing construction and building of projects far past normalization in almost every regard except for availability of supplies and labor, obviously, but certainly that doesn't hold water. And I also kind of agree with Mayor Gailey, and the location of this as a park and not a trailhead really doesn't meet the intent of the original agreement. So, you know, I also question the language of the dating as well. It seems pretty clear that while it clearly says that they are sticking with the original date, with the exception of everywhere where they change the date, which is the only purpose of this agreement. So I think this is definitely one where there is value in taking a second look and maybe having some additional conversations about what this is and kind of putting the next on the calendar and when we're going to see said trailhead or park at what location before we really agree to any amendments at all.
Okay, so what we can do, we had this slated for action, obviously, depending on this meeting, but give us about a month to go back and talk to Marysville, refine some of these concerns. We can bring you back the actual schedule that they've proposed, at least for design, and then get more information on funding. I know they have a grant right now. I don't know if that's just for design or design and construction. So we'll get that sorted out, bring this back to another workshop. And if council's comfortable, then we'll move it to action, but we'll slow down and ask some questions.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir. Appreciate your hard work.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next topic, which Russ will also be doing, and it is the proposed discussion of proposed changes to the cannabis facility citywide allotments.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Daughtry. So this is a conversation we had a couple of months ago after you'd gone to public hearing, and then we started to have the conversation about the business license fee. Council wanted to revisit what the allocation is citywide. So as adopted in July, it put about a 70,000 square foot cap in the city, and 54 of that was dedicated to producer processors, with the remainder going to just standalone processors. As council has talked about how they'd like to reimagine this area, definitely a concern is, do you want to be locked into this type of a number? And so council was of the opinion that they wanted that more flexible, to see if over time, maybe it would shift from more grow operations to processors, which have the potential of bringing in more jobs, or something else entirely. So as we had talked about it, this is sort of the language I proposed to the council when we were discussing this, and wanted to get your input on the proposed language, and then we can bring that back to you as a revised ordinance at a future meeting. Any questions or comments?
Russ, can we get consistent on the, I mean, it's just a mathematical thing, but we're talking about 17,000 square feet for standalone and 54,000 square feet for producer processors, which I think that adds up to 71,000 square feet. Yet you're putting a cap at 70. Can we kind of square that around a little bit?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. I think that the intent was that there was going to be a go back to an overall cap, and I had just rounded that down to an even number, but we can definitely put it back up to 71. The maximum for producer processors, the growers, that could even go to 50 if you want to play with the numbers a little bit. It would have some go into a legal non-conforming status for a while. That's not necessarily a detriment. It just is, what is the number you're comfortable with for the total cap moving into the future. So happy to make any changes you'd like to see there.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Mary, go ahead.
I had a question about this. I'm reading a quote here. The number of marijuana realtors or retailers shall be one. I was wondering why. So nobody can compete. I just
So
just odd wording, I think.
When marijuana licensing started, every city was allocated one retail location. Prior councils have, and planning commissions have debated this. And when we had the option to expand to two, the council was pretty firm that they wanted just to maintain the single retail location. And so that's why it's very specific.
Okay, thank you.
I have a similar question. Is that the case also with the 1,000 square feet of retail space? Is that a city decision?
That was a city decision, putting a limit on the size of that retail location.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Do we have, so Russ, do you have what you think you need?
If I can just get a consensus, do we want to move the number to 70 or up to 71? If I can just get a head nod for 70 or a head nod for 71.
I'm fine with 71.
Me as well.
Okay, I'll make that change, and then I'll bring this back on your next meeting as a consent item.
Okay. The last item we have on our agenda is ordinance 1117, cannabis business license fees. Russ, you're on again.
Okay. So the parallel conversation we've been having is about this business license fee. When we talked about this in July, you had seen some rough numbers that Toyer Strategic had prepared as they relate to some businesses in California and what was going on there. Some of the conversations that council had, you really wanted to sort of know why there was a disparity in the range of these numbers. And so that was some of the information we've brought back. Again, we asked Toyer Strategic, since they had been doing this initial research and working with these different cities, to reach back out. And, the information they shared is in the memo. But what we found is, and this was a big point of our council as well, what is that breaking point? And it sounded like $8 per square foot is becoming the more normalized number that, different businesses are comfortable with. There's a difference in the taxation scheme in California than there is in Washington, and definitely a disparity with nonprofits. That's why the numbers were so varied. So hopefully that addresses council's question, but if we're looking at an $8 per square foot, that's smack in the middle of the proposed range that Lake Stevens is looking at, between $6 and $9. So anyway, just looking for direction from council tonight. If your questions were answered with this additional research, and if you're ready to move forward with implementing this business license or not.
Gary?
Russ,
Go ahead, Gary.
I have two questions.
Sure.
You indicate that the $8, I have three questions. You indicate the $8 in smack dab in the middle between 6 and 9.
It's close. It's
Okay. I was
$7.50 would be in the middle.
very good in math in school, but I figured that one out. Looking through this sheet that has all the comparable charges in California, all in California. If you were to take the average, and I know there's some differences about 3,000 square feet, anything over 3,000 square feet, it's $10 per square foot, things of that sort. There's some adjustments as the facility gets larger. But if you're to take away the $100, the nonprofit only, Rancho Cordova, California, and use an average figure, you're at $19 a square foot. I mean, we're not even close. So I guess I would say, council, that needs to be in consideration. The other question I have for you is more of a procedural question. When we do, I mean, the intent of this ordinance is to really generate some income for the city to do some other activities, correct?
That is correct.
And so I've always been under the impression that, and I'll use building permits for an example, we don't really just willy-nilly come up with a price for a building permit. We have a building department, we have a budget, and we kind of work backwards as to how those things are set. There are some state fees and so forth that kind of dictate building permits, but we don't charge $25,000 for a building permit to use $20,000 of that for whatever. And so I look at this ordinance, and that's exactly what we're doing here. And so the question I have is that legal to do that? And I say that because this could be a precedent for other fees that we're looking at. And I don't know it's in the best interest of the city to start generating funds off activities through licensing fees to subsidize other activities. We have mitigation fees that are appropriated for specific things based on the impact to those facilities. But this is just kind of a, I don't want to use this term, but I will, it's kind of a money grab in the sense that we've already determined that we need about $180,000 for code enforcement, and yet we're looking at generating $400,000 to $500,000 off this activity, with the other income being used to do some promote greater economic development in the Hartford-Machias industrial area, encourage expanded recreational tourism that benefits the city downtown retail area. And that last sentence isn't even related to what this activity is. I get what we're trying to accomplish, but I guess the basic question is, can we even do this?
Well, as to the can we do it, our city attorney, has reviewed this and worked closely with the mayor when this was being developed. So I believe from his perspective, he didn't have concerns. Obviously, we can bring this back in the next session and have the city attorney answer that question directly. But I believe he was okay with the precedent setting portion that you're describing.
Just to clarify too, I think Councilman Peter Sagan, the sentence that you referred to, maybe I'm not remembering correctly, when you talked about increased retail tourism, that was specific to marijuana tourism. Is that correct?
No, that's not what it says here. It says expanded recreational tourism that benefits the city's downtown retail area.
But is that in reference to the conversation around marijuana tourism and the idea that it would bring more people to the retail area?
It's really the Centennial Trail and the link between Hartford, Machias, and downtown Lake Stevens through Old Hartford, and then any connections on 20th and 16th. So it is really use of the trail as a regional tourist draw.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Russ.
Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You jumped right in there, Russ, and got it all straightened out. The other issue that I see here is we're concerned about, because I do Centennial Trail all the time, we were concerned about the odor coming across the trail from the marijuana industry. But we don't seem really concerned about some of the development that's going right next to the trail on 131st Avenue Northeast, where trees are being cut down left and right. I'm sure that all of you got heard from the Longley family and their concerns about what's happening. And I did witness that when I was down at the parking lot there by Centennial Trail off of 20th. I noticed there were trees down, and I noticed there was things going on there that maybe will not enhance our town, will not enhance the beauty of Centennial Trail. I call the Lake Stevens part of the Centennial Trail the industrial part of the Centennial Trail. I would like it to be at least have trees. So that's my concern. Are we concerned about the trees? We're concerned about the odor, yes, and I get that. But I think we need to be more vigilant about the trees and what that will do to the neighborhoods, particularly with the heat that we've had. The more trees we cut down, the more it impacts our environment. And that the beauty of Lake Stevens is our foliage and our water and everything else. It all works together. So that's my concern right now. And what we do with the marijuana retailers, I thought it was interesting that we don't talk about licensing fees in Washington or Snohomish County. I don't really know how to compare it with California and Colorado, but anyway, I think maybe there's a bigger picture here if we want to pay attention to the beauty of the trail. I think we do have work to do in that area. And yes, I do think people get drawn into our town because they're on that trail. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
So I guess I'm really looking for some direction tonight for the consensus of the council. Is this something that they're still interested in bringing forward and passing, or are there other issues that with this proposed business license fee that the council ultimately is not going to support this proposal moving forward?
You're muted.
Is this operation is not operating currently, correct?
That is correct.
They are waiting the outcome of this ordinance?
The ordinance is not in effect. There are different producer processors already working. No one is exclusively waiting for the passage or not of this ordinance to take effect.
Go ahead, Brett.
I lost my train of thought. Okay, so a couple things. Just totally blanked out. So with this business license fee, we're cutting new ground. Lake Stevens would be the first ones to look at a business license fee like this on the cannabis industry. And as far as the rate, $8 or whatever it was, $19, Gary. I think that it's smart to just see where the market is, and I think that lower would be better in this case. The impacts of this are going to be interesting to see, because you have we've got 54,000 square feet of grow right now, and how will that impact at $8? How would it impact at $19? Would those business owners be able to absorb that? I don't know that answer. But one of the things that we've got to think about is, do we really get good mitigation revenue from the cannabis industry taking up that much space in our industrial area? I would say no. We get roughly $44,000 a year off of the excise tax for the cannabis square footage that we have. That doesn't compared to the impacts of the environment that the cannabis industry has down there, compared to the impacts of other industries that could have better jobs, could have better opportunities for our citizens. I would say no, it doesn't. We don't get that revenue back from that industry. So I think that this is a great opportunity for us to one, replace some mitigation revenue that needs to be grabbed for that area and be used to. We all know that we want to revitalize that Hartford area. We've got good plans to do so. And two, it gives a heads up to the state. It gives a heads up to Olympia that hey, you're taking all this money back to Olympia and giving pennies back to the cities that are having to deal with the impacts of the cannabis industry. And in this case, smell, in this case, low jobs. And it's just not fitting for our city at this point.
Okay, so I'm going to weigh in. Here's my problem with this, and that is this is setting a precedent, okay, for the state to look and see what we're doing with cannabis. But what about a precedent for other industries? For instance, there's an industry right outside my door. It's a little childcare facility, home childcare facility, and they just have their little permit fee that they have to do, and their state fee and all that, and the impact of that on the community right around them is listening to screaming little girls all day long.
Only the girls are screaming?
Well, I don't know. It sure sounds like it. They're really high pitched. So I don't know. It could be all the kids. I didn't mean that in any kind of a sexist way. It's just when I look across the street and see the kids that are screaming, they are all wearing feminine type clothes. So it could be boys. I don't know. But it's really high pitched. It's really irritating. It's to the point we don't even want to be outside. And so should we maybe raise the fees on home-based childcare facilities because of the impacts it has? So this is a kind of a facetious way of looking at, and by the way, that is occurring, but I'm being facetious in this and just giving an example of where this might lead. There's other industries that cause impacts that we might be interested in raising their fees to try to take care of, quote unquote, those impacts. I'm worried about the slippery slope. That's what I'm worried about. So the unintended consequences of this.
It seems like that would also then come to this table, and that would be a conversation we would have if and when that were an issue. I guess I feel like we've looked at this from several angles, and we've talked about the kind of the pros and cons and the issues that need to be mitigated, and come up with a fee schedule that seems fairly conservative. I feel comfortable with where we're at, and this is something I would support moving forward.
Angie, if I may, I believe it was said a couple of months back, the applicant is the one that came up with the fee structure.
The applicant for whoever's proposing a new,
This
a
fee
new
schedule
business?
of
or-
$6, $7, $8, $9 was proposed by the applicant. That is,
Building a new facility.
yeah.
The consultant for the applicant, yes, has been
Right.
the one doing that research, and
Right.
Is that the Toyer group? Is that how they're involved?
yes.
So it wasn't a fee that we came up with. It's a fee that's proposed by the applicant.
Thank you. I appreciate that information. For some reason that didn't register. So that's interesting. So they're proposing a fee. They're doing the research on what's happening in other states. And they're the ones proposing a new business. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So Angie, how this came about is the owner of the processor that's going in spoke to me personally and said, "Hey, we want to give back to the community. Yeah, we want to do a 1% of our gross revenues into the city so that we can so you can use it for parks or whatever to give back to the community." And that conversation went into, we don't have that mechanism to do that. We can't tax you. He essentially wanted us to tax him 1%. So we don't have that capability to do so. So that's how this evolved into this discussion of the square footage business license fee, is we found that is a way to do it.
Mayor, is there a reason that the business owner couldn't just simply make a donation of his choice to the city?
They absolutely could. This was a route that they asked to go.
So the problem I have with that, in reality, is it's one of the businesses down there asked to do that. What about the ones that are already down there? They didn't ask to do that. So we're forcing them into doing the same thing as somebody that asked to do it. Is that accurate?
Well, but I think as we also look at trying to mitigate the impacts of the cannabis industry down there, I think that it becomes equitable at that point.
So how are we able to put a monetary figure on the mitigation that's necessary down there?
Well, that's one of the things we'll be bringing back to the council probably in the spring of next year. Once we get that infrastructure analysis completed, we'll have a better idea of what the cost of all future improvements are. We already know sewer improvements are in the, several $1 million in the area. Road improvements probably are very close, so we will have a better idea of the magnitude of improvements in that area to interest other types of development in a few months.
This is a tough issue. I'm almost tempted to say, why don't we commit to a fee for 1 year and see what happens?
Yep.
Tempted to say. I didn't say it. I'm just tempted.
Councilmember Peter Shagan, it's interesting, just the very high level information of the cost of improvements to things like sewer and drainage and roads. That area really kind of highlight your concern about the fees themselves and whether or not the $8 is the appropriate mark.
Well, and if we're looking at improvements in that area, why wouldn't we increase fees for any business that's licensed in our industrial district?
That's a very good question. I guess I would say, for the most part, the employers or the businesses that are in the Hartford area are quote small businesses, and I don't. I'm thinking of a fencing company in particular. He probably couldn't afford any of this. So, just because the margins are so slim, I think there's a general perception that the marijuana industry is a cash-heavy, very lucrative business, and we've probably all heard reports of people that are involved in this industry that are making money hand over fist. So, granted, there's some folks that have not been successful, but at the same time, I think the majority of the folks that have jumped into this industry are doing quite well. Could I'm sorry. Could we possibly do interim ordinance, I guess, in the sense that maybe $8 is the magic number, and we go with that for a year, reevaluate everything. And I know the operator probably wants to see some consistency, but this is a tough issue.
Yeah, we could definitely bring it back with an increase up to $8 as the starting, and do a sunset in a year if it's not readopted or reevaluated at that point.
So Gary's right. This is hard. The more I think about this, the less I like it. This almost sounds like, I'm trying to figure out how to put this so everybody understands what I'm really trying to say without using screaming little girls across the street. This looks like to me that we don't know how much that the mitigation to take care of the problems set forth by this industry in the Hartford area, we don't really know what that costs. So we're going to ask for money to fix it. And then whatever is left over, we can do whatever we want with. That's what this tastes like to me. I've seen something similar in other councils in the South. So I think that a fee, the way that we've normally done our fees, Gary brought this up at the very beginning, and that's where your permit fees are to pay for the people in the permit center and the inspectors and things like that, along with some of our, they're supposed to pay for themselves by doing that. And so if we know that we have police calls, code enforcement issues, and nuisance complaints and those kinds of things, we can quantify that, then we could say this is how much it costs a year to do that. And so your fee is based on that. So those are my thoughts. If we want to do it for a year and see how it works, great. But I'm having a hard time with grasping how we're coming up with this number and what it's really supposed to do.
I guess
it's not going to even touch any of the sewer. It's not going to hardly touch anything, but maybe a couple of 100 feet of sidewalk or something, and a year.
Sorry, I'll raise my hand.
Go ahead, Angie.
I think Sean might have had his hand raised before.
Oh, did he? I didn't see it. Sorry.
Councilman Frederick.
Well, I am sitting here mostly in the shadows. So I'm going to ask one of those, I just don't know the answer questions. If there were an interim ordinance, and it doesn't seem like a horrible idea, I'm curious if the ordinance, since we would be reevaluating this in a year, if this were to move forward, can the ordinance specify criteria that would be used for the reevaluation? And that could help add clarity a year from now when we revisit this conversation, so that we actually have some agreed upon points that we were going to evaluate this particular issue using specific criteria.
Absolutely. We could add metrics that as appropriate. For example, using the proceeds for this, staff responded, how many code enforcement, cases did staff respond to, odor complaints, how much, sidewalk infrastructure or road overlay was constructed. I mean, we could definitely look at some metrics and bring those back and build that in to show if it's made a dent, I guess I'll use that term, in issues in the area.
I think that makes sense. I kind of like that idea. It's a measured approach. And I think to some of the concerns that that this could be potentially viewed as a cash grab, then you have a mechanism to really reevaluate what the fees should be based on cost recovery of services to mitigate impacts.
Angie?
Yes, my question would be whether or not we could, kind of going back to what Councilman Peterson had talked through, if we could determine those costs and set the fee accordingly. I think that the part that I'm struggling with is that these are fees that are set by someone with a vested interest in moving forward with a business. And it's based on, it's based on what they're requesting, not based on what we've determined our costs are. And that feels strange to me.
I just need to point out to Jackie Longley that we do not take public comment or questions in a council workshop. I see that you have your hand up. But I'm sorry, we do not take comments or questions from the attendees in the outer area during a workshop. You could bring it back next week for a normal public meeting. Mary, go ahead.
Well, basically, I agree with Angie on that. It just feels like who's making this call on $8? Who's making that call? And it's just, I don't know. It just feels weird. It doesn't feel like it's working for me. I'm sorry.
Russ, are you comfortable with, I guess, is everybody comfortable with Russ at least coming back with some sort of interim ordinance that would have some metrics, as Councilmember Frederick indicated, and maybe a guesstimation of what fees would be appropriate?
Yeah, we can do that, setting aside the examples we've seen in other jurisdictions. If the desire is to have a known cost, we can definitely bring back some information, almost like when council has discussed the TBD program, where you've said, I want to have a list of specific projects that we're tying that to or activities. We can certainly bring it back more polished, dollar amount, and then reflect on what is that cost per year, and then what does that transfer then to a cost per square foot based on this soon to be 71,000 square feet.
I would certainly feel more comfortable with that. Thanks, Russ. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, I would as well. Okay, does anybody have any other questions about this subject? All right, seeing none, do we have anything else to bring before us in a workshop environment? Anybody? I almost said Bueller. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, the only thing I want to be sure everybody's aware of, and I bet you are, is that the senior center was closed down because of the COVID case. And I appreciate the time that I have spoke with Jean, I believe, about trying to help the senior center. They're going to have to do hand out lunches again, run by volunteers, and they're completely out of money. When they were able to have lunches inside, they would charge people, but they say that it would be best to just give free lunches, but they have no money to do that. So I'm wondering if there's a plan that we can put in place And that's the only thing I want. I hope we'll ponder whether the ARPA funds might be one of the directions we could go, or the Volunteers of America, or who knows. But it is an issue, and it certainly was a hard day when they had to close down again. But it was kind of predictable. Yes, it was. So that's all I have to say.
Hey, Mary, I talked to Jerry today about that, and I'll get with staff tomorrow to figure out if we need a council decision to get them some ARPA money, or if we can just do it with myself.
If
All right, anybody else?
Along those lines of the ARPA money, are we going to be seeing some sort of budget proposal from the mayor, or how? What's the process for distributing this money that we have?
You know, we met on this, about a month or so ago, and talked through some things. For me right now, there's a couple little things like the senior center. I'm just sitting back watching, seeing what these other agencies are doing, like the county and the state with their money, and just seeing where we need to fill in I'm not in a hurry to die on this money, because I want to make sure it's a good, long-lasting impact for our city. And I think that requires seeing what other folks at higher levels are doing with their money, and how we can best use ours at that point. So an immediate budget, Gary, no, I don't have anything. I'm just waiting to see what these other folks are doing. We really want to look at, if obviously the immediate needs, and I'm not sure that there's a lot. And then we want to look at how do we shift pots of money so that the money is more flexible, right? We're looking at some of the sewer district or the sewer projects that we're having, and can we pay money, use our ARPA money for that to free up money to, build a park with it instead, that sort of thing. So I'm just still sitting back watching the process to see how other funds are going to get freed up that we might be able to use instead of our own.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And it'd be great to be able to leverage part of ours into somebody else's.
Absolutely. But I don't want to go out and immediately say, hey, we're going to spend money in all these areas, and then realize, we didn't need to do that, if that makes sense. But I really want to make a long lasting impact that 20 years from now, our city says we use this money wisely.
All while realizing we have to spend it in a certain amount of time.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any comments? Any of the other staff on the call have anything? Jane, do you got anything? No? Well, then I guess I'll go ahead and get us adjourned. Thank you very much for coming, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank